Hey guys, what is up? Kid here of Burn One with the Shadowverse Evolve channel, bringing you another deck profile for set 3, this time on Abysscraft. This is an OTK control list that I'm very interested in playing a lot more. I think it's a lot of fun. It is a little bit slower than other decks, but it has the tools to get there to set up the OTK against most crafts, except maybe Haven Craft if they're playing control. But let's just get right into the deck profile itself. All right, so let's just get right into the deck and I'll explain a little bit about the combo towards the end here. Obviously, Bellringer Angel is a 3 of. This is a solid 1-drop. We need to survive to the late game because our plan generally is to win the game around 10 play points is when it happens. Sometimes earlier depending on how our opponent responds. So we just need ways to slow down the game. We want to make sure aggro decks can't aggro us out and give us the time and breathing room to set up our OTK. Obviously, we play one of the Evo. It's just good value overall. This helps us stave off aggression. Once again, we can ping something for 2 and remove it off the board if needed, and then still has last word draw a card, so it helps with the consistency in that sense, as well as staving off the aggression. Angelic Snipe, I decided to play this as a 2 of. I just wanted more tools to either ping things off, or sometimes you're left with a follower on the board that has like 1 or 2 health after like trading something into it. Angelic Snipe is a good way to just finish it off that way. And also it's 1 play point, and a lot of times you're floating 1 play point. This is a good way to just, scare your opponent a little bit. You have Angelic Snipe in there. You can get rid of things like Silent Suzuka, which is 2 health when even on Evo. Things like that are really scary for us to deal with because we don't want to take that damage when it happens. Angelic Snipe is a really good tool in that sense. Soul Conversion is one of our key pieces to get card advantage. In this list, we do play Lilith, which is coming up, so we can trade some of our bat tokens to draw 2 cards. Otherwise, we can trade off Bellringer Angels plus this card for 2 play points to draw 3 cards to help find the pieces we need. Solid card all around. New card, Punk Devil here with Ward, 2/3 Ward. You're going to notice that a lot of our followers actually have Ward or ways to clear things off the board to set, give us time to set up for our lethal turn. 2/3 Ward has an activated effect where you just take 2 damage and then give this follower Bane. And the one thing to note is that Bane is like basically permanent. So that means if you give it Bane and then engage it, anything they swing into it that doesn't remove this immediately will also remove their follower. So if there's a big follower expecting to come up here, you can give it Bane and Ward, and now they have to use some kind of spell or something to remove this. Otherwise, their follower, no matter how big it is just going to get removed. And that has last word heal too. So if you end up not using the activated effect, this is just a ward that 1 protects you from a swing, so it's probably going to at least minimum save you 3 damage, and then it's going to heal you 2. So in a sense, you're almost healing 5 in that scenario. Really solid card. You're going to see this in Abyss for quite some time. Like I said earlier, we're still playing Lilith here. She's back. It generates tokens for us to trade off to draw more cards, so we can keep our card advantage without having to trade 2 cards to draw 2 cards essentially. And then it does Evo, and it heals us too with Strike. So the fact that we want to live longer, and there's a lot of decks in this format right now that have ways that burn out to close out the game, just incremental heals here and there will actually make it really hard for those decks to actually close out the game. Surefire Bullet, 3 of. Like I said, this is a basically control deck. There are a lot of people playing Fable cards, which means they're playing Alice. Alice is a really good target for Surefire Bullet because it's 4 health on Evo. So you just pop that away. And then if you're attacking a non-Evo card, there's a lot of 2-drops that now have 3 health in this format, which means that this will just trade with those cards as well. Solid card all around. There's still going to be things like Dragon Warrior and stuff like that, which you'll be able to remove with Surefire Bullet for very easy cost. Marzensky here is another card. This is kind of like our 3-for-1 card occasionally, but a lot of times it will be a 2-for-1. It is a 3/3 that has Necro Charge 10, so the enemy fall on the field and give it -4/-4. The Necro Charge comes up occasionally, but it's definitely not happening too often early game. But what's really good about this card is it's Evo. It's on Evo, you get a -2/-2 somewhere, so you can get through wards, things like that. But also, if there's one big follower that has like 6 health and it's engaged, you can play Marzensky, Evo it, -2/-2 it, and then swing in with the 4/4 to remove it. If you have the Necro Charge, this is almost like a 3-for-1 depending on what your opponent's board state looks like. You can pop 2 followers and then crash this follower into another one, and then trading off that follower to remove it. And then it's basically one card, remove 3 cards. So this card is insane value as the game goes on and on and on, essentially. Rapunzel is our 3-drop ward. Once again, it has the effect that if there's no Fable counter on it, it can't attack enemies, but that's not important to us because we're just trying to set up an OTK, so we need to live long enough to set up the OTK itself. And the fact that this can't swing isn't a big deal because on curve it's a 4/5 ward that's really rough for people to remove. A lot of times if you went second, for example, and they go into turn 4, they have to, if they want to get through this with only like 1 card, they're going to have to use execution, something like that, to remove it, and that basically eats up their entire turn. Otherwise they end up trading like 2 cards into this a lot of times, especially against Sword. Playing this on curve against Sword is one of the most annoying things for Sword to deal with. They essentially, the only way they can really deal with this card is if they have a literal board of 5 cards and have a Unbridled Fury in hand to remove it, and that's the only way they can get maximum value and still swing into you for damage. That's like kind of, I feel like that's like the only time you have to really worry about this card getting removed and you taking a lot of damage on curve. Path to Purgatory, there are some aggro decks like Sword running around. I also want to get more draw advantage in this deck. I like Path to Purgatory. You don't have to play it yourself if you feel it's unneeded and you're getting enough draw already. But on play, you draw 3 cards and deal 3 damage to yourself. The fact too is that you have a lot of ways to hurt yourself in this deck, so you can set up a Path to Purgatory turn. If you're getting low already, you can play this down and set up the 6 or less life to tap this and then send this to the cemetery to deal 6 damage to the enemy board. 6 damage generally gets through everything right now in this format. A lot of stuff just kind of chills around 5 or 6. 6 is usually the tipping point where people are like feel safe because it gets through egg. This still clears those boards as well, so you have that way to deal with that. Otherwise, if you don't like this card, honestly, you can cut it because this deck list is a 42 card deck list because I felt it's okay to go a couple extra cards over because of Dark Alice, which we'll talk about later. Cerberus, another key piece in this deck. You generally need to find at least one of these during the game before you start setting up lethal because of its fanfare effect, which is put a Mimi or Coco token into your EX area, and then Necrocharge 10 put both into your EX area instead. Mimi and Coco, both respectively being Mimi is a select an enemy follower on the field, deal it 2 damage, and then Coco is select a follower on your field and give it +2 attack. Both of those spells cost 0 to play. This is how we set up OTKs. We generally need 2 Cocos in our EX area before we can end our opponent in 1 turn. We do play 2 of its Evo. It's a solid 5/5, and then on Evo you get a copy of each spell once again. So this is great value because you get to do control while also presenting a 5/5 body that can trade into something else if needed, and then you have the spell tokens for later to set up your OTK turn. Soul Dealer has been an amazing ward and aggressive card as well. So it has the fanfare on play, deal 3 damage to your leader, which is kind of annoying, but its Evo makes up for that. This is a 4-drop 6/5, so it's overstated. It does cost to the Evo, but on Evo, you select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and give your leader +X, where X equals the selected follower's attack. So there are a lot of like 4 attack or so followers in this format. And also in Sword, you'll just be running into a bunch of 5/5s a lot. So this is one way you can play this. Destroy the 5/5. You heal. You essentially heal 2. You heal 5, but you took 3 for playing the card, so you essentially heal 2, which is all right. And this is kind of how you ward off that, and it's still a huge ward, so you can swing into something, remove it. It will live with like 1 HP if you run into a 5 attack follower, which is really good, which means now they have to run something else into it or use something to remove this card. 7 attack basically destroys everything in this format right now for the most part. We play Execution as a 3 of. Not only does this do Amulet Hate, so against like Discard Dragon, it randomly is good because I feel like there's not that much Amulet Hate running around right now because a lot of people are playing a bunch of the Fable stuff. But if your opponent against like Forest or Haven, they get kind of greedy with the amulets and leave it on the board for a turn, you can execute it away. Otherwise, we use this in the later part of the game to set up our lethals to get through wards and big followers that we have to take to swing our Dark Alice for 10 damage to our opponent. Dark Angel Olivia, once again, is an amazing card. I love cards that have multiple effects you get to choose from to kind of, you know, curate exactly what you need that turn. So a lot of times you will do like draw, discard your opponent, or heal, discard your opponent. You just ways to limit your opponent's ability to respond to things. It presents a 5/5 body. It's really big. It's pretty solid card all around. And, you know, once again, healing again in this format, there's a lot of ways for people to burn you out. So getting incremental heals occasionally is like makes it so much harder for your opponent to just end the game that way. Finally, we have Dark Alice here, which is the big reason we can set up these OTK turns. So Dark Alice itself has Rush and Strike. Each opponent discards a card, which is insane for this card, since if your opponent doesn't play around having to discard sometimes, you can play this, you know, remove something, and then they have to discard a card. Strike happens before quick plays, so that means they have to discard a card before they can respond to this card itself. What's really funny about this card too is the last word effect, which is banish the top 10 cards of your deck, put this follower onto its owner's field, and then discard a card. One thing to note about that effect is discard a card is not part of the cost to get the card out. So if you have a 0 card hand, this card can still come back. Just because you have no cards to discard doesn't mean it won't come back. The only thing you gotta be worried about is decking yourself out, which is the scary part. But if your opponent responds to this and destroys it, and you use the last word effect to bring it back, it can swing in again, making them discard again, which is pretty funny. But you got to be careful in those cases, because sometimes you can't just, you know, mill 20 cards in one turn or banish 20 cards, that is. So the way we set up this combo for Dark Alice, obviously, is we have our good boy here, Azazel, Necrocharge 10. This costs 3 less to play, so a lot of times when you start playing this card, it's going to only cost 4, and then it's pay 1 to evolve. It has Bane itself, and then on Fanfare, each opponent discards a random card. The Evo form on Evo sets your opponent's life total to 10, and it still has Bane, and it's a 7/7. So there's a few ways we can set up lethal in this deck, which is pretty funny. The easiest way to do that, obviously, is we set up a Dark Alice on the board with already having 2 pump spells in the EX zone, and then if our opponent removes it during their turn, once we pass turn, we just banish the top 10 cards, bring this card back to the field, and they have to do something again to get rid of it. Otherwise, it will be able to swing on our next turn when they pass the turn, which is very, very scary, which means we can double pump this for 4 and then swing in for 10. That's 10 damage to them. The other way we set up lethal here is it's later in the game. We still need a double pump, or actually you don't really need the double pump in this case, but it's safer to have the double pump just in case. But there are turns where once Azazel only costs 4, you can play Azazel, not Evo it, play Dark Alice, swing in if you want. I probably wouldn't if I'm trying to do this specific combo, but leave both of these on the board. You suddenly have 2 6/6s for 10 play points that turn. If they remove Dark Alice, you can just bring it back by banishing the top 10. If they remove Azazel, usually you can have a follow-up Azazel the next turn in your hand to Evo. Make sure you don't Evo this until you're set up for lethal the next turn. If they can't get rid of both, because 6 life total in right now, or sorry, 6 health for our followers right now is rough for some decks to deal with. For example, like Egg, we'll have to spend an egg basically to blow up the board, leave these with 1 health each, and then use abilities to remove the last couple hit points you need, and then, you know, Dark Alice can come back if needed. But you have these on the board. If they can't really remove it or respond very well, next turn you just Evo Azazel and then run in with both for game that way. If need be, you can have the extra pumps from Cerberus. But that's kind of the general game plan of this deck. You don't really care about your opponent's life total until later in the game, when you can set up the Azazel Evo turn into Dark Alice. One of the big things though is getting Dark Alice out on 6 is a way you can start setting up lethal if you have an Evo point. So like having Dark Angel Olivia the prior turn, if you went first, give you an Evo point. That way on 6 you play this, they are unable to remove it, or you just bring it back with the banish 10. Next turn you play Azazel Evo with the Evo point to set their life total to 10, double pump Dark Alice, and then swing in for 10 to end the game that way. So that's one of the ways you can end the game on turn 7 essentially, as long as there's nothing you really have to worry about there, because usually the Azazel will set their opponent life total to 10. The Bane from this will usually remove any ward followers in the way, and as long as they don't have any way to really respond to the Dark Alice at that point, then you can swing in with the Dark Alice for 10 damage with the double pump off the Cerberus. So the big key pieces here is you need to make sure at some point you get 2 Coco's pumps into your EX zone to always threaten the 10 damage OTK essentially, and then make sure to have a Dark Alice at some point to just, you know, run in that way. One thing to note too is you don't have to always use the last word, because it is a cost to banish the top 10 cards of your deck to bring a Dark Alice back. So you don't always have to do it. So if you have a Dark Alice in your hand again, after this one gets removed, you don't have to do the effect. If you're not ready to set up the OTK, I think the only time you need to use the banish effect from the last word is really when you're setting up the OTK to end the game that way. But besides that, this is a really fun deck. I implore you to try it out. It's a really fun deck. I think it takes not a lot of finesse to play this, but it does take a couple turns or a couple games to really get used to it, to set up these lethal turns. If you haven't played Abyss before, it's a fun deck. I would totally take this to locals and have a lot of fun with it. With that being said, guys, like, comment, subscribe if you made it this far. We really appreciate it. We've been growing a lot, especially during this set as well. And with that being said, we hope to see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.